What's up, guys? Aaron Benzrum here. Some of you might know me from YouTube. Others might know me as an instructor at the Bernardo Free Academy or as a competitor. Today on my instructional, we're going to be discussing the leg drag. We're going to break down the leg drag as a position, as a guard pass, and we're going to learn how to use it from the bottom. We're going to talk about conceptual applications so that you understand that there's multiple variations of the leg drag, and then we're going to discuss specific passes and techniques that you can apply against certain guards. And from there, we're going to progress into applying the leg drag from the guard and from scrambles. The leg drag is a very, very good position that you can utilize in gi, no gi, MMA, self-defense. And there's so much to the position that a lot of people haven't been able to present. So I wanted to organize this in a fashion that's very, very easy for you guys to digest. So let's get into it. All right, guys, so to start the instructional, I want to start with a preface to the 3 variations of the leg drag that you're going to encounter the most. I'm going to discuss the one that I like to use the most, which is the variation that we're going to be doing a lot from, but I also want to make sure that you understand that there are multiple variations to this position. So let's get started. The first variation that we're going to go over, you can lie on your side, is going to be the staples. Turn this way. So the staple happens when my left knee, so the knee that's going to be pinning his hip, is going to make contact with the mat. The reason that I call it the staple is because my shin and my ankle are going to staple his bottom leg to the mat. So in this case, Ty's bottom leg is his right leg. So this is the staple position. Okay, so both knees are on the mat. You can be in a variation of the combat base. So you can be here. You can also use your knee to pinch his hip. There's multiple ways to do this exact variation, but the overall concept of it is that this knee is on the mat. So let's turn. So this knee is here. If I don't make contact with the mat and I'm just on his bottom leg, that's fine. As long as the most important part of this is what I call the sticky hook. And it's going to be that my left leg, in this case, is going to make a hook with my ankle on his calf or his ankle. It's going to differ from person to person and from where you are, obviously in the scramble. But ultimately, I want to make this connection and I want to be able to move his leg with my leg. See how I can move his leg? I'm able to do that by turning my left knee, pardon me, into his belt and my left ankle out. So I'm kind of turning myself. So I'm almost at a perpendicular angle with him where I'm like this, and I'm kind of trying to drive. Now, we're not talking about the pinning mechanics or how we solidify the position, which we're going to go over. So I'm not going to discuss putting his shoulder on the mat, misaligning his spine, or keeping his shoulder off the mat and putting him in a single hip position so I can attack the back. Those are all things that we're going to be getting into. Right now, I just want to discuss the body positioning. So again, I can have this knee up, right knee. I can have right knee down. But I want to make sure that my left leg for the staple variation is pinning his bottom leg. Okay? So again, these are just quick overviews. The next one is going to be the combat base. So the combat base is going to be very similar, but rather than pin his leg, his bottom leg with my leg, I'm going to keep my knee off the mat. And in this case, it's going to be the knee that was initially pinning his leg. So this is the combat base variation. So I'm here. Another thing that's very important to note, whether it's the staple or the combat base, is that my ribs are going to put pressure on his quad, and I'm going to make sure that I have a connection of my elbow and knee so that I can pin his leg. So let's turn just a little bit. So if you look, turn this way. If you look at my elbow, whether it's the staple, my elbow is really, really tight. Okay, and I'm normally grabbing the collar, or whether it's this, my elbow still has that connection with my leg. Because what is the concept of a leg drag as a whole? I'm dragging his leg across my hip line, right? So as long as I'm here, this is very important. More importantly than this is it's something that you have to feel. My ribs are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on his leg in order to keep it squeezed to my leg, like so, right? So this is so important. So between having his leg across my body, my ribs putting pressure on his leg, my elbow making a connection with my own leg, and then if I'm in the staple, hooking his leg, these are all concepts that need to be applied universally through every leg drag, right? So this is the combat base. This time this leg is up. I'm tight. My right knee is down. We see a lot of people like the Mendez brothers use this variation because when you're like this, your opponent still has freedom of his bottom leg. They try to turn into you, and then I can start to solidify my pass. So now again, to review, we have the staple. So I'm hooking his leg. This is my preferred method. I'll explain why later. Okay, my knee is on top of his leg or it's on the mat. Okay, I'm perpendicular. My elbow makes a connection with my leg. I'm grabbing his collar. My ribs are heavy on his leg and I'm putting pressure. So that's our staple. Our combat base, I'm on my right knee is down, my left leg is up. In this case, the leg that's going to be controlling his hip. My elbow is still connected with my leg. Can be at the knee. The tighter, the better. My ribs are still putting pressure. I'm still holding. And then my last variation is the standing. This one I don't do nearly as often, but the standing variation, a lot of the concepts remain the same. I drag his leg across. I almost turn away, and then I clamp his leg here. I just think it's more for an athlete to do this position. It requires a little bit more athleticism because you're kind of holding a squat and you have his leg. And when you bring into account the fact that your partner's going to be scrambling and spazzing, it can be a little bit more difficult. But people that use this really successfully are guys like Nicholas Margali. He's really good at doing the standing leg drag. So again, we're here. My elbow is still connected with my leg, guys. That's super important. My ribs are still putting a tremendous amount of pressure on his leg, so he can't pull his knee out. He tries to pull his knee. It's really hard, guys. And I'm here. And from this position, we can pass. So again, staple, combat base, standing. Staple, combat base, standing. Everything's the same, guys. We have to focus a lot on this leg. All right? All right, guys, so now that we understand the preface and the three variations, the staple, the combat base, and the standing, let's elaborate a little bit more on each one. Right now, we're going to discuss the staple, which again is my preferred method, so it's the one we're going to be seeing most often throughout this instructional. Almost any time that you see me demonstrate the staple method, you can apply the combat base or the standing. Almost any time. Obviously, there's going to be some subtleties where you're not going to be able to do those, but for the most part, you'll be able to. But for right now, let's just look at the staple. So again, ties on his side, and I'm able to drag his leg across my body. Okay? I staple. We're not going to talk about entering the staple because there's a bunch of different ways. We're just going to talk about the control methods and principles for the staple. My knee is going to come either over his leg or to the mat. Either one is fine, so I can create a staple over his leg. The reason that I personally prefer this is because I'm a light featherweight. So I compete at 137 without a gi. Oftentimes, I'm training with guys who have 40, 50 pounds on me. So I need to do everything I can to maintain this single hip position that I'm trying to force. Sometimes when I use the combat base one, if guys are just a little bit strong and I can't close the distance with my chest to chest and I can't control this leg, they're able to force me or they're able to pummel their leg inside and lift my leg to them. Because I have super light legs, especially compared to a bigger guy. So I like to do everything I can to utilize my weight distribution, which is why I personally prefer the staple. I think it's the best for weight distribution purposes. I think it's the best for pressure application. So again, my knee comes down and my leg, I can't emphasize this enough, hooks his leg. Okay, why is it so important for me to hook Ty's leg? Because one of the number one defenses to the leg drag is for my opponent to pummel his right leg inside and go to an outside ashi. This is huge problems for me, especially in no gi. If he gets to here, he off balances me forward, I'm in big trouble, right? He's going to start going into different leg entanglements. So in order to evade this, I need to keep this hook tight because if he starts to underhook my leg and he starts to try to pull it through, I don't care how hard he pulls it through. As long as my ankle has connection with his calf or ankle and my hook is tight, trying to pull it through, it's going to be extremely difficult for him to pull it through. As he pulls it through, we'll see further in the instructional, this presents opportunities to continue to pull it through, to start to attack different submissions, attack the back, and start to open up opportunities. So a lot of the system that I'm going to be demonstrating happens from there. Now, if you're in the combat base, some of these same situations can occur, but you have to know when to switch. So for example, if I'm here and he starts to pummel, or starts to underhook my leg, I can go back into this position. So again, like I said, they're pretty universal, but I like to start here. Okay? Now, the next thing for our control is going to be that pressure with our ribs. That pressure with our ribs and the ability to keep his knee in our armpit or elbow. It depends on your size. I'm pretty long, and I'm also extremely flexible, so I'm able to get really, really low here. I also make this connection. Now, why is this important? So we addressed the bottom leg, the right leg. He tries to pummel, he tries to underhook our leg with his arms, and he tries to pull it through. What about the top leg? A couple things that we're going to see with the top leg is our opponent is going to try to open their knee up and push us this way, like so. That's not the end of the world. We can use that as an opportunity to pass. But if we're not prepared for it, or if we're not pinning this leg strong enough, he might have an opportunity to retain guard. So rather than giving him that opportunity, I want to make sure to pin it initially and keep this leg up, pinning his knee. So if he tries to turn, it's much more difficult. And then I can use that opportunity, he turns, to pass a little bit more control. Okay, so we want to keep pressure on this leg. And again, because I'm smaller, I need to keep all that pressure. Now the secondary controls are going to be his upper body. So if you notice, we've been focusing on the lower body. We've been focusing on the bottom leg, on the top leg, and if he tries to pummel for that outside option. So what do we do with the upper body? This is going to differentiate based on what we want to do on top. Do we want to use the leg drag as a pinning position, which we're going to go over? Do we want to use the leg drag to take the back? Or do we want to use the leg drag just to establish the guard pass? If you just want to establish the guard pass, one of the best concepts that you can follow with the staple is to misalign my opponent's spine. So what do I mean by that? I focus left hand on the collar. If it's no gi, I just grab the armpit. Okay? If it's gi, I grab the collar. So again, no gi, I just grab the armpit. My bottom hand is going to come through. If it's no gi, I just pin his shoulder when both knees come to the mat. If it's in the gi, I can grab a nice upper collar grip and make sure to keep my forearm in his shoulder. And I can put my head low and drive my pressure forward on my toes. Because now I'm misaligning his spine. What I mean by that is that his knees are pointing in this direction and his shoulders are on the mat. Anytime, go back on your side, that my partner's spine is in alignment, he's more structurally sound. What I mean by alignment is his spine is going straight down this way. So if I can force him this way, he's just going to be naturally weaker, right? This is an uncomfortable position, which is another reason I love the leg drag, because I'm taking a lot of Ty's strength away. So if I want to pass the guard, most of the time my goal is going to be to flatten this. Sometimes it happens in transition. So go to open your knee up, like so. Sometimes I'm able to do it beforehand, right? And then I can pass. And sometimes my partner just won't let me because he's busy trying to underhook my leg. We're going to learn to address all this stuff. Now, if I'm searching for the back, I want to do the opposite. I don't want to put the shoulder on the mat. I want to take the shoulder off the mat. And I can do so by using my head. So he tries to put his shoulder back. I keep my pressure. I slowly start to walk this way, use my chest. And I come to here. Now I can start to attack the back. I can start to attack bow and arrows. I can start to attack gift wraps. So these two concepts are very important to understand from the staple. If I want to pass, I want his shoulder flat. If I want to take the back, I want his shoulder off the mat. If I'm just trying to keep this as a pinning position, then I just need to keep this leg here. I can use my hand to either keep the shoulder flat or let him come up. But I need to focus on maintaining the position, which would be keeping this knee across my body, keeping this leg down, and never, ever, ever, ever allowing him to pull my leg through. Okay, we're going to discuss what we do if he pulls our leg through later in the video. But just to show you where we're going, if he starts to pull your leg through, we have to very quickly straighten and we have to start to knee cut our leg out to keep a hip connection and get out. So guys, let's move on. Let's look at the combat base. All right, guys, so now that we looked at the basics and control of the leg drag staple variation, let's look at the basics and control of the shelf variation. Shelf is just another name for the combat-based variation, whatever you'd like to use. The nomenclature's on you. So the shelf or the combat base is with this leg up, meaning that I'm initially controlling it. The reason it's referred to as the shelf is because I'm kind of providing a shelf for his leg to sit on. As my leg is up, I can rest his leg here, and it's very, very easy. As opposed to if I'm here, this leg would naturally fall down. It's not as much for it to sit on. All right, another reason it's referred to as combat base is because we're in a combat-based position. This leg drag is my second favorite variation, and I use it very often, and I interchange between this and the staple. So the beauty of the shelf and the staple is that I can go from one to the other, right? So if I'm here nice and tight, and I feel like he's pushing me too much away, I can always switch into the staple, right? But if I'm here and I'm just controlling, sometimes with the leg drag, people will concede to the pass. The most important thing about controlling the shelf is that you have to understand a couple of different things. First and foremost, you're not controlling the bottom leg as much. So you have to understand that he may be trying to pummel and be ready to switch into the staple, okay? Secondary to that, I need to have an enormous amount of control on this leg because that's the focal point of this shelf, right? With the staple, we're focusing more on both legs. With the shelf, we're focusing solely on the upper leg for the most part. So again, my ribs, I turn myself, I push my ribs. You should be able to hold his leg, try to move your leg a little. For the most part, just like this. The elbow should be secondary to the ribs, right? My ribs are pushing down on his leg. Now my elbow comes in. Now again, I can control the collar. I can control the ribs. I can control the shoulder. It depends on your arm length. Or if it's no gi, I can just keep tight to his ribs. Okay? Now, the next thing with the combat base or shelf variation is since this leg is not up, like it is for the most part with the staple, if my opponent does shove me this way, there's a chance that I can fall over to my hip because this leg is not up for base. So one thing I like to note is that you have to be prepared for that. And by doing so, understand that your right hand may have to post. Much like when you take the mount, if you're attempting to do like a cross choke or an Ezekiel, and you know he's going to upa you really, really hard, you have to understand that you may have to let go at some point in post, right? That's part of jiu-jitsu. You could be seconds away from the cross choke. He makes one last big upa, he shoves you, and maybe he puts you in close guard, or maybe you just post and then re-attack the cross choke. It's very similar here, right? I can be here and here and controlling, but maybe he shoves me this way. I keep my hand out, right? So that I'm not falling over. If I fall over, it is not the end of the world, right? So if I'm here, I fall this way, it's not the end of the world. And we're going to learn why, guys, because a lot of our attacks for the leg drag in this video are going to come from bottom. And oftentimes when you're here on bottom, you can bring your leg out and you can re-attack the leg drag. So as long as his leg stays across your hip and you're controlling it, whether you're here or on bottom, you can still attack the leg drag. So again, it's not the end of the world, but we want to try to prevent it. So being preventive is most important. So I keep my right hand free or ready to post. Now, when I'm here in the shelf, I like to just keep this control. I still like to turn my knee into my elbow like so. And I'm more looking for the pass. I'm not really looking for the back here as much. Why? Because notice the alignment of Ty's body in this position. He's flat. Now, if we look at the staple, he's on a single hip position. Flat, single hip. So when he's flat, I'm more looking to start to pummel for the head. I can use a combination like a hybrid side control of the shelf leg drag with head control. I love to do this where I keep his leg across my body, tries to pull his leg back. I can push into him, and it's very hard for him to establish a good guard retention. And then at this point, I can start to pass, right? So the shelf can be used primarily as a pinning position or to get the guard pass. So again, we're here. We're always looking to get to here, and we can control. Don't overcommit and go way too high, and then he throws you this way, right? We just want to get enough that we're chest to chest. We have good head control, always pulling our opponent to us, keeping the elbow tight. He tries to move, and I'm able to pin. Now, again, always being careful. Pummel your right leg in. Always being careful for this. If you start to feel that pummel, we're going to have the knee slide right out. That is something that has to be addressed immediately because that is the most common method of guard retention from my personal experience. There may be others, but good guys, especially today, are trying to pummel that leg back in. I myself, when defending the leg drag from bottom, am almost always looking to pummel that leg back in. So let's move on, guys. All right, guys, so now that we've been able to look at the preface to this instructional with the 3 different variations of the leg drag, the staple, the combat base and or shelf, and the standing position, we've broken down the staple, we've broken down the shelf combat base. Now let's break down the less common but very important standing leg drag. The reason that the leg drag from a standing position is a little bit less common is because it's a little bit more athletically demanding. So you might find yourself in a position where it's harder to do. Me personally, I'm young, I'm pretty athletic for the most part, but I don't even like doing it because you're kind of holding that squat. It creates more of a scramble, and you just have to be ready to back it up with follow-up techniques. So for example, when you're in a standing leg drag, you might have to switch to the back step. There might be a couple different situations that you encounter that, again, are more athletically demanding. But that does not take away from the merit of the technique. It's a very good technique, and it works well. The thing that I want to address with the standing position of the leg drag is that you can go into the shelf or the staple from a standing position. So let's discuss first how we control from a standing position, and then let's discuss how we can combine the attack with the other variations. So standing position, Just to so you guys understand how this can occur is maybe I'm here, right? I have a collar and a leg. I pull his leg across and I get into this position, right? This isn't a position that I'm going to be holding. This is going to be a position that occurs more when I'm like passing the guard, right? I'm here and I get to here. So what I mean by combining with other variations is maybe I hit a quick pass, which we're going to go over a bunch of specific techniques and applications, but I get to here, he's freaking out, he's pushing me, I'm holding, and then maybe I circle and I get into the staple, right? It's not a position that we can utilize to pin nearly as successfully as the shelf and the staple. So that's something that I think you need to understand. This is a position that we're finding the leg drag from a standing position, but we're ending in one of the other two variations. Yes, you can hold it and you can combine it with other passes, but for the most part, when we get to here, right, our opponent's not just going to sit here and accept, and we have no control of this bottom leg. So the problem becomes he can post that leg on the floor and start to hip escape. Yeah, right? He can start to lift his hip up, pummel, kick, and do a bunch of different things. So when we're able to attain the standing leg drag position, let's turn this way. For the most part, we still want to make sure, and this is why I think it's a little bit more athletically demanding, that we're able to use our ribs to pin the leg, right? Then we want to make sure our elbow comes as a secondary method of control. We're nice and tight. He starts to freak out. I go into a shelf or a staple variation, pardon me. And then I can start to pass. So we can look at the standing leg drag as more of a bridge that will connect us to our other variations. Again, I do want to emphasize, you can control somebody from here, especially somebody more inexperienced, but it's going to take more. You might put yourself in a position where you're creating more scrambles. So let's go back again. For example, I don't want to get too off topic, but oftentimes I get to this position when the guy does a huge turn into me, I switch my hip very often, right? And I get into this position. And this would take us into one of my favorite attacks, which we are going to go over in the instructional, which is the rolling leg drag, which just to show you where we're going would mean I roll through, bring his leg here, and I end up back in the staple. So consistently trying to find myself in the leg drag position, using one method to connect me to the other, but seeing how the standing can create that scramble, right? Because I don't have as much control, so naturally he's going to be moving, flailing, spazzing, and I'm going to have to shift my approach and combine more attacks, which isn't the end of the world. To be completely honest, using the standing application, if you're a white, blue, or purple belt, even brown or black, will help your progression into understanding the path better than the other two variations, because it's going to force you to be in a position where you need to use more jiu-jitsu than solely these leg drag positions. So that's the point I want to get across. So one more time, just to reiterate, standing, I still drag the leg across. I'm always dragging the leg across. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet in the instructional is I see a lot of people, when they do leg drags, they drag the leg across here, like so. This is different. This is almost like a folding pass, like a half guard scenario. So this is not the leg drag. They drag the leg across their hip, but it's not necessarily across the body. The leg drag is when both legs are on the same side of your body. So for example, this is the left side of my body. Ty's right and left leg are on the left side of my body, right? If I was doing it this way, which is improper, Ty's left leg is on the right side of my body. So his left leg is on the right side of my body, and his right leg is on the left side. So this is not a leg drag. I need to drag his leg this way, whether I'm stapled, shelved, or standing. Okay? So standing, rib control, elbow control, keeping myself low, active toes, and getting ready to switch into different passes if I need to. Oh, guys, let's move on. All right, guys, so now that we've gone over the preface, the staple, the shelf, the standing position, we've talked about the conceptual applications of each individual variation. We are now going to talk about understanding the path. So we've mentioned it here and there throughout discussing how we apply each variation, but now I want to discuss specifically what the path is overall from the leg drag. There's going to be a couple different things that we're looking for. There's 4 different things, okay? First and foremost, the guard pass. So the common perception with the leg drag is that it's a guard pass. You hear people say, oh, do you know the leg drag pass? You immediately associate that with a guard pass. So That is the first and most important thing that we try to accomplish with the leg drag. The secondary thing is going to be pinning and control. So the leg drag is an extremely effective tool for pinning and control. Okay, so we have the guard pass, the pinning and control, and then the other path that we can take is going to be submissions. Okay, so we can attack submissions from the leg drag. And then our last path is going to be back attacks. So again, to reiterate those, we have our first variation, which is guard passing. That's one of the most important principles of the leg drag. That's ultimately what most people associate it with. That's what we're trying to accomplish with the leg drag. We want to pass the guard. The second is going to be pinning and control. Sometimes in an attempt to pass the guard, we have to establish a good pin and control prior to doing so. Okay, the third is going to be submission. Sometimes in that process, when we're trying to establish the pinning and control, we'll find submissions. And then our last is going to be to attack the back. Attacking the back is pretty much just a different path, right? When your mind is set on attacking the back, you're going to have to give up a lot of the things that you would do to establish the guard pass to try to attack the back. I personally love to attack the back from the leg drag. That's probably going to be the thing that I hit highest percentage. That doesn't take away from the fact that I often pass guards with the leg drag. It's just something that I want to mention to you guys because I'm always honest in my instructionals. That does not mean it's the best thing. That does not mean it's the right thing. That's just what me, Aaron, likes to do when doing the leg drag. So let's look at the path. So I have my opponent here. Whatever variation of the leg drag I've managed to do, right? I've managed to get him into a staple position. Okay, I have a good leg drag. This leg is up, so he can't knock me over. I'm nice and tight. If I want to attack the guard pass, which is our first priority, the first thing that I want to do, which we mentioned briefly, is misalign his spine. I want to make sure that my opponent is not structurally sound so that I can weaken him and I can use my weight distribution to establish the guard pass, right? Seems simple on the surface. Now, when you factor in the fact that he's going to be going crazy, it's not always as simple. So if I get a good staple, right, I'm here, I'm nice and tight. Another very important component to this path is going to be head positioning. Head, body, chest positioning, right? I want to keep my head nice and tight, active toes pushing into him, because if he tries to move, I don't want him to be able to move too much. It's not realistic for me to sit here and tell you guys, especially being 140 pounds, that you're going to be able to control anybody at any time and they're not going to be able to move. Okay, this isn't a dream world, right? Your opponent's going to move. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't like to sugarcoat things, but you're going to be able to control him a lot better than a lot of other passes, right? So again, I'm here. He's trying to move. I'm able to control, and then I'm able to dig for the head control. Notice that as I dig for the head control, I'm consistently keeping my leg in the position, I guess conceptually, as a leg drag. I'm not in any of the positions that we discussed, but this is essentially a leg drag. His leg is still dragged across my body. So when I'm in this position, which is one of my favorite ways to pin, I still keep this here so he can't draw this knee back. Because what's an effective way for him to retain guard? To draw the knee in. Arguably the most common way. So another beauty of this is now he tries to draw his knee in. It's extremely difficult. I'm always active toes. Let's turn. What I mean by active toes is even when I'm here, my toes are active. I'm trying to keep my hip up. I'm never just flat. I don't keep my hip here. Because if he tries to push me, he's going to be able to push me easier. Right? So when I have my toes active, let me get a grip. He tries to push. Much more difficult. Now I can start to establish my guard pass. So that's our first path. Whether you do that from the staple or the shelf, it's going to be the same, right? If I'm here in the shelf, I'm controlling him. My head position is still important. I get to here. I turn. Again, toes are still active. This is going to be a position that we use a lot. I don't worry too much. Something that I know viewers are going to want to address about this arm. So before I get any messages, I do not worry too much about opening his arm. Because again, I don't sugarcoat things. And jiu-jitsu, as precise as we may like to be, we all know from our rolling experience, it's very hard to hit every little detail. I find, and I stick to this philosophy, that if you hit a technique 50% correct at the perfect time, it will work more successfully than if you hit the technique 100% correct at the wrong time. Because if timing is everything, and if you hit it at the wrong time, I still don't think you'll be successful. That's why I don't worry so much about moving the arm with my knee, pushing it out. I rather have the right timing that I know I'm able to finesse my way to the pass. So what I mean by the right timing is if I'm here in the shelf and I feel he's going to open up, I can feel his weight, that's when I move. Okay? Because now he's really off balance. I still have his leg across, and I'm going to be able to ultimately get into a guard pass. And I like to keep a high mobility game. So this is for another instructional on how I maintain guard passes. But oftentimes, once I establish the pass, I don't worry too much about the arm because I immediately switch my hip, start to turn, come the arm belly, switch sides, start to attack different attacks. I very rarely am looking to just pin somebody. And again, my game has been built around the fact that I'm smaller. So back to the leg drag, our first path is to pass the guard. Our second path, let's go back into the leg drag position, is just pinning and control, which we discussed this a little bit more. So whether I'm in the staple, right, and I'm able to control him, or the shelf, or I stand and then bridge myself into the staple or the shelf, I want to be able to control him from this position. So here's the tricky part. If you compete, I can't tell you for sure, but I believe IBJJF does not count this as a guard pass. I'm not 100% sure. I know from my experience when I've competed with them, I've kind of been in the leg drag looking for points, and I don't get them sometimes. Sometimes I do. I think it's up to the discretion of the referee, but I personally think this is an excellent pinning position. I personally wouldn't fault anybody at the academy when they're training in my class for stopping here because you've done the work. Your opponent, you're 90% passed. In my eyes, you're passed. You've passed his guard. And at this point, it's his job to move. Now, I don't encourage people to just sit on people, but look, sometimes it's the fifth round. We're tired. We don't want to move. You get to the leg drag and you're just chilling out, pinning your opponent. That's fine. That's fair. You've done so much work to get here. And I do think it's a great position to control somebody. Although we might not have head control, there's ways that we can implement it. So that's our second path. And what we do is we keep his shoulder down, we keep his spine misaligned, and we can use the staple, we can use the shelf, or we can use this hybrid variation of side control leg drag, which isn't really a leg drag variation because we're more passed, but we can do this as well. I control people so much like this at the gym, and I use this as an opportunity to start to maybe hunt the back on this side, maybe hunt the arm triangle, maybe just establish a side, but I use it to control because, like we discussed a couple seconds ago, the primary method of guard retention is for him to draw this knee back in. So we're immediately preventing that with the leg drag. So the second thing that I want to emphasize is that this can be a pin and it can be a control position. The third thing is going to be submissions. And like I said in the beginning of this clip, submissions are going to come as a result of your opponent's defense. Okay? It's very difficult, for the most part, to force submissions from the leg drag. But there is a multitude of different attacks that you're going to be able to capitalize on based on your opponent's reaction. So submissions are secondary to the pass and the pin because submissions come as a result of the pass and the pin. So what I mean by that is, let's look at our most common defense. He underhooks my leg. Okay, he's putting himself in a terrible position. He is now committed solely to trying to get my leg out. In doing so, he's opened up opportunities for the arm triangle, right? If I can get here, keep my head low, get my leg out, walk around the hip, now I can start to attack the arm triangle, okay? In attacking this, go back to the leg, right? If I get to the arm triangle position, he's opened up opportunities for my favorite submission from here, the Ezekiel choke. You can finish the Ezekiel from here. You can circle out and start to attack from here. Okay? If I'm in the shelf leg drag, I've been able to pin him. My opponent's not moving. There's a lot of bottom entries to submission. Maybe he's doing a good job framing me, so I'm not able to pass. So I just move here and I go into a honey hole. I often go back to the legs from here. It's been one of my favorite entries, right? Because now I can get an inside heel hook, in my opinion, the most powerful leg attack. I can start to attack different things. If it's IBJJF, I can shift, start to attack the knee bar, whatever the case may be. I'm putting myself in a position to start attacking his lower body again. So there's going to be a lot of submissions that come as a result of your opponent's defense. There's arm bars, right? Even from the standing leg drag, if he starts to just push on me, I can come here and I can go for the arm lock, right? So there's a lot of opportunity from this leg drag. A great example, and I don't often reference things in my instructionals, but if you're watching this and you paid for it, do yourself a favor and watch what I believe is the 2012 match of Rafa Mendes and Cobrinha, and watch the leg drag arm bar from Rafa and Cobrinha. I think it's like the only time Cobrinha has been submitted in the last 10 years. And it's the exact variation of the arm bar I just showed. Standing leg drag, he was holding it, pushed, got the arm bar. It's one of the best techniques from the leg drag. So let's go back. And then our last path is going to be to attack the back. So attacking the back is almost separate from everything else, because I think to successfully attack the back, you want to be fixated on that path from the get-go. So you want to go into it like, you want to be 3 steps ahead. So I'm going to do this guard pass. I'm going to try. If it's successful, I'm going to get the leg drag. When I get to the leg drag, I'm going to try to move to the back. Obviously, things don't always go according to plan, so there's going to be plenty of opportunities to attack the back in transitions. Maybe he defends the submission. Maybe I use the arm triangle or the Ezekiel that I just demonstrated to get to the back. But a lot of times when I'm trying to attack the back, I stick specifically to the staple only, and I'm trying to keep the shoulder off the mat. So if I see he's pushing me or anything, I use it to push his arm. I pin his shoulder with my shoulder, keep my head on the outside. He tries to move back. He's unable to. Okay, I like to grab the back of his gi. I like to use my elbow. We're going to talk about the specific back attacks later, but what we want to do when attacking the back is keep his spine aligned and keep him in a single hip position. Single hip position means that he's only on his right hip, right? He's not flat. Okay, so that's going to be our goal to attack the back. So if we're attacking the back, we're trying to keep him here. So again, we have a lot of opportunities. We can pass the guard, pin and control, attack submissions, or attack the back. All of those go hand in hand. All those work in conjunction with one another depending on how you're attacking them. So take everything with a grain of salt, right? Maybe you try to attack the back, he starts to defend, and you get the guard pass, right? So let's look at that real quick. Because I don't want you to think it's one or the other, right? Maybe I'm here trying to attack the back, he's turning into me, and I get the guard pass, right? So they're all going to go hand in hand. These are just the ways that I laid them out that I think personally makes the most sense, but nothing really makes perfect sense in jiu-jitsu, so most guys. We just looked at how we can use the leg drag to pass the guard, to pin, to submit, to take the back. We've looked at the staple, the shelf, the standing application of the leg drag. We've looked at a bunch of conceptual control principles. We've looked at so many different things that have helped you build a foundation on which we're going to be able to elaborate and build upon throughout the rest of the instructional. We're going to talk about a lot more. What I want to end this volume with is how the leg drag is more than a pass, right? How we can utilize it from so many different places and for so many different things. So we know that it's a back take, a submission place, a pin and control position. But more than that, the leg drag is an amazing concept to think about throughout all of jiu-jitsu. So from bottom or top, you can utilize the leg drag from the guard position to attack directly into a pass. You can utilize it from takedown positions to attack directly to a pass. So I think rather than explain this stuff, it's better that I demonstrate how, so that now that you understand the leg drag more than you did prior to this, you'll be like, oh, I see that. So for example, let's look at single leg X. Stand up. This is a common position I demonstrated a lot. So the single leg X, I get into the position, right? This is a guard position. How could this connect with the leg drag? Well, imagine that I'm here in the single leg X. I'm able to sweep my opponent, right? I sweep him. Now look, guys, instead of just getting up, I can turn my body, pull his leg across, control the knee line, come up to an elbow, come up to a hand, technical stand up, staple leg drag, right? Obviously, I'm going slow for the sake of demonstration, but this is one of the simple ways that we can apply the leg drag passing concepts from bottom, right? We go single leg X straight to the leg drag, right? We can do it from the X guard. We're going to go over the specific application of this later, but maybe we're in the X guard, so bring your leg up more, right? I extend him. I'm going to trip you that way. I trip him. He falls. Look, control the top of the toes. Pull the leg through, come to the elbow, technical stand up, and now I see the leg drag. Maybe we're here standing, so stand, right? I pull this leg forward, I get the single leg, and look, I move my leg out. Guys, I'm essentially in a leg drag, so if I'm able to trip, I fall directly into the leg drag. So we're starting to see the leg drag from a bunch of different positions, takedowns, guard. Furthermore, you can see it from other passes. So let's look at the most common pass at my school, being the Bernardo Free Academy, the over-under. Everybody wants to over-under. So we're here, right? We're in the over-under. We're passing. We straighten the leg like Bernardo says. He's proud. We kick our leg up. Okay, we get to here. Now look, I switch into the leg drag. And now I find the leg drag again. I'm consistently looking for the leg drag from almost every pass. And this is what we're going to be discussing throughout the next 2 volumes. We're going to show how we apply it from different passes in the next volume. And then we're going to show the specific applications of the pass against guards. So how do we do it from De La Riva? How do we do it from reverse De La Riva? How do we do it against single leg X? And then we're going to discuss it from bottom. So again, you can do it from so many different passes. It's such a good position from bottom, from standing. So I just want you guys to think bigger so that you understand how you can implement the leg drag in almost every single aspect of your game.